let's see the pleural membrane. The pleural membrane is very, very important in order to maintain the pressure that is needed for the lungs in order to respirate. Like I told you, the lungs are a special kind of tissue which do not have contractile nature. The lungs don't have contractile tissues in them. Hence, the lung single-handedly can't inflate or deflate. They are just there hanging. What makes the lungs inflate and deflate are the negative pressure present in the pleural cavity. We will see what that is. And it is also the contraction of the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles that inflates the lungs and deflates the lungs. So the cavity inside the rib cage will open up, expand, and it will contract, which aids in the movement of the lungs eventually. Otherwise, single-handedly, the lungs can't do so. So what is a pleural membrane? Firstly, let's see what is plural, pleura, or simply pleura. So we have two kinds of pleura. We have an outer pleura, which is known as the parietal pleura. The word parietal means a wall. In Greek or Latin, if we'll translate the word parietal, it means a wall. So the outermost layer of pleura is known as the parietal pleura. Then the innermost layer of the pleura, which is in proximity to the lung, is known as visceral pleura. Visceral means deep, like the visceral organs, like your spleen, kidney, your colon, your gallbladder, liver. They are visceral organs, right? Sometimes we categorize fats into visceral fat or subcutaneous fat. So visceral fat is also known as deep fat. So anything which is a little deep, which is not superficial, is known as visceral in nature. So looking at the names, it's very obvious that visceral pleura will be closer to the lung and parietal pleura will be away from the lungs. And there is a small gap between both of the pleuras that creates a cavity. Do you see this cavity here? This cavity here they have exaggerated the cavity. It is very, very narrow space, very thin space. It creates the pleural cavity. It creates the pleural cavity. And these pleural membranes will cover the lung. They will cover the lung. We have these kind of membranes even on the heart. On top of the heart, there is a layer, pericardial layer we call it. So the pleural membrane, also known as the pleura, is a double-layered membrane that envelopes each lung. It consists of two layers, the visceral pleura and the parietal pleura. Now, there is a pleural cavity, which is a thin fluid-filled space between the visceral and the parietal pleura. This cavity contains a small amount of pleural fluid. So there is a fluid in between these cavities. Between the visceral and the parietal pleura, there is a fluid inside, which serves several important functions. What could be the function of it? So every time you inhale and exhale, if the pleural cavity was not there, the lungs would have constantly been rubbed against the rib cage, right? The ribs would have been rubbing the lungs every time you inhale and exhale. And we do so much of it. Even when we are asleep, we are constantly breathing. Breathing is something that never stops. It was the first thing you do and the last thing you will do when your time is done. So many breaths in one life will create this friction if there is no pleural cavity. So the role of the pleural cavity is to secrete a fluid, the pleural fluid, which works as a lubrication. The pleural fluid allows the two layers of the pleura to slide amongst each other smoothly as we breathe, reducing the friction as the lungs expand and contract. Then it also does something very, very important, which is the pressure maintenance. The pleural cavity maintains a negative pressure. We will see why negative pressure, why not positive pressure, which helps keep the lungs inflated and assists in the process of breathing. Let's see what we are talking about. So, outside in the atmosphere, there is a certain pressure. Outside the lungs, the pressure is 760 mmHg. Let me see if I can pull this up using a mouse. mmHg. mmHg stands for millimeter of mercury. Hg refers to the component mercury here. This ties back to the time when pressures were seen relating to a mercury meter. So 760 mmHg, 760 of millimeter of mercury is the atmospheric pressure outside. This is the atmospheric pressure in the sea level. Obviously, it will change as you go up. Maybe if you are going up towards Mount Everest, this will have a slight change. It will differ there. But we take 760 mmHg as a standard where there is a sea. At the sea level, the pressure of the atmosphere is 760 mmHg. So at the moment, the pressure inside the lung is also 760 mmHg. Inside the lungs, the pressure is the same, 760 mmHg. So now, think as if you have a set of balloons. The balloons in the room are deflated because the balloon is in a pressure that inside the balloon is also the same pressure, 760 mmHg. Outside the balloons is also the same pressure, 760 mmHg. It means in the same pressure, the balloons will be deflated. The balloons will be deflated. They are not inflated. So inside the pleural cavity, there is a negative pressure of -4. You can remember this. Inside the pleural cavity, the pressure is -4. Why -4? The pressure, the decrease in the pressure, I'll let you know why it is such. So the pressure here in total is 756 mmHg. Inside the pleural cavity, the pressure is 756 mmHg, or I would say -4 simply. And how this happens? So firstly, the parietal pleura will tend to stick towards the deflating lungs. The parietal pleura here will tend to stick towards the lungs, which if are there in 760 mmHg, will naturally deflate because they are the deflating balloons which are there. But then there are the ribs, and to the ribs there is a connection with the visceral pleura. So the visceral pleura will pull out, being connected to the ribs, due to which it will pull out both the pleuras towards the rib cage. So anything which is fluid in nature, like water, it has a cohesive bond. So sometimes, if you have tea in your cup, and sometimes when you try to lift up the teacup, and if the teacup was wet underneath, the saucer plate, if it is a light weighted saucer plate, potentially when you will suddenly lift up the teacup, the saucer plate also comes up with the cup. That is because of the cohesive nature of the water. Water sticks, it bonds together. Sometimes you will see, if you overpour water into a glass, when even if it is overpoured, you will see the water on top is dome shaped. It is never flat, it is dome shaped because there is some cohesion happening. The cohesive nature, the binding nature of water will create a dome shaped, it won't instantly drip out when it is totally to the top. So every liquid will try to bring two surfaces together because of its cohesion. So there is a cohesive bond here between two pleuras. There is a cohesive bond. The parietal and the visceral pleura are very much sticking to each other because of the fluid which is present there inside. But the outer pleura wants to go out with the lung as the intercostal muscles are contracting. And then inside the pleural cavity, there is a -4 pressure, mmHg, due to which the lungs will constantly stay in a form of inflammation. Does this make sense? The lungs won't be deflated if the atmospheric pressure is 760 and if the pressure of the lung is 760. Simply it means there is zero pressure here. You can also call zero pressure here and zero pressure inside the lungs. It means the lungs are just deflated. So the negative pressure of the pleural cavity will help to create that bloatedness in the lungs so that they don't collapse. So they don't collapse. So this is when we say that the pleural cavity has a role of pressure maintenance. This is why the pleural cavity is very important. Sometimes there is excessive fluid buildup in the pleural cavity. We call it pleural effusion. This is a medical condition when the membranes of the pleura will secrete more fluids. Then there will be a condition known as pleural effusion. Then somehow doctors have to come in and they need to take out the excessive fluid from the pleural cavity. Sometimes there is a condition where the pleural cavity can get punctured, when there's some damage can happen to the pleural cavity, not the lungs, but just the pleural cavity. Then we will say pneumothorax. The condition is pneumothorax, starting with the P. The P is silent here. In pneumothorax, the cavity will be punctured, and because of the puncture of the cavity, the -4 mmHg pressure, the negative pressure, will be lost. Hence, the lungs will deflate and it will naturally be, equivalent to the atmospheric or the room pressure which is present there. So inhalation will become hard. So pleural cavity is very, very important here when it comes to the process of your respiration.